Every city claims to have them, and every city will tell you that theirs is the best. Most larger places will lay claim to having quite a few. I am, of course, speaking of secret bars, or, in some cases, secret clubs. They generally fall under a simple concept, a bar with no name out front, where a secret password is required to get in, and may have cost me my soul. The year was 2001. I had just turned 21 earlier that year, and had already done up all of the new freedoms that come with that age. I had done bars, strip clubs, casinos, you name it. At first, it was cool, because for years I had felt like a kid, like some wet behind the ears idiot that the rest of the world sort of just patted on the head. Even after turning 21, things remained annoying. People would hear that I was 21 and treat me not like an adult, but as a new adult. Like a grown-up that still needed grown-ups. I was annoyed. I worked downtown in a dreary office job inputting data. The nice thing about it, though, were my hours, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. For a single guy in his early 20s, it was perfect. I got to sleep in every day, and I would get off work just in time to take the quick walk from the New Orleans Central Business District, cross over Canal Street, and bam! I was in the French Quarter. Land of booze and women. Lots of fun times were spent down there. But as I said, even that began to get boring. Really boring. So, I began to research secret bars. I found a few right away, and most of them were just as boring as the regular ones. One in particular, called Mythique, is located up a narrow stairwell, accessible only through a tiny door located under the bar downstairs. And once I got up there, though, it was just another bar. The clientele were a bit more pretentious, and most of them thought that they were the second coming of Lestat, but in the end, it was the same thing. A bar, drinks, people, and usually crappy music. I remember one night, I was at home in my tiny apartment using Metacrawlers, remember it was 2001, and searching for more secrets in my city that I was now old enough to exploit. I kept finding links to the same boring places that I always went to. Then my email binged, or I should say, announced, "You've got mail." I clicked open on my email and saw the heading for the message, Secret Bar. Now, I was sure if I had asked anyone on my AOL buddy list for help, and I didn't recognize the sender. I figured maybe I was in a chat room one night and asked around, but it was worth a check. The email was simple and short, and read something like this. Secret New Orleans Bar. Looking for a journey? Not afraid of hell? Too shy for heaven? Then come visit us. Be in Jackson Square tonight at 2 a.m. Wear a black shirt and gray pants and have a cup of coffee in your hand. Seat yourself in the third bench. This is your only invitation. Miss it, and you'll never be invited again. P.S. Come alone. Tell no one. That was the end of the email. I was lucky that my job required me to wear a suit, because it just so happened that I had a pair of gray slacks. I pulled on my black t-shirt and realized I actually looked pretty good. I figured this could be a prank, but even if it turned out to be nothing, I would go out and have a few drinks anyway, maybe even get laid. I didn't have to go into work the next day, so this night could turn out to be fun anyway. However, I may have been a bored, idiotic 21-year-old, but I was not totally stupid. This could also be a trick or a trap or something worse, so I called my best friend Mike. I told him that I was going out with some strangers from work and that I wasn't sure about them. I told him I would call him by 4 a.m. and if I didn't, for him to call and check up on me. I told him I would be in the quarter. Mike had to be up for work at 4 a.m., so it wouldn't put him out of his way to call me when he got up. I left my apartment around 1:30 a.m. I only lived about 15 minutes from downtown, but I figured I would make sure that I was on time. By 1:55 a.m., I was sitting on the third bench in Jackson Square, sipping my coffee and waiting. At 2 a.m., the cathedral bells rang out twice, and I received a tap on the shoulder. A gorgeous woman was sitting next to me, and I thought to myself, this is too cliché to be real. To me, she seemed like a walking cliché of a hidden bar. Goth girl, mid-20s, really hot. Yeah, she was from the bar. I knew it from the start. "I'm Jody," said the woman. "Well, at least you're not Raven, or Death, or Lilith, or some other stereotypical goth name," I replied. But I did so with a smile. She returned my smile with one of her own. "No, always been Jody, and you must be Kurt, right?" She knew my name. Very cool. Of course, my name was on my AOL profile where the email was sent, so if this was her attempt at a cool trick, I was one step ahead. "Yeah, Kurt, that's me. I guess you're here to show me to the secret bar," I asked. "Only if you're ready to journey to hell or heaven, depending on your tastes. We like to consider this to be the first back-out point for our new clients. You can decline the invitation now and go home, or to some other bar, or wherever you like. Only be warned that no other invitation will come to you again." I considered this, and decided that it was already after 2 a.m., and I was out dressed and full of coffee. I wanted to see this place. "Lead on, Miss Jody," I replied. She stood up and began to walk ahead of me at a rapid pace. We walked in silence for some time, weaving deep into the quarter, past Bourbon Street, past all the loud and drunk tourists, past the warm and safe lights, the cop cars, the music from the bars. Before long, we were in the dark part of the quarter, mostly residential, and very few people were on the streets this way. She suddenly stopped and walked up the stoop to a private residence. She fiddled with keys, opened the door, and gestured for me to enter. "Wait, is this someone's house?" I asked. "This is the house where the dead scream in silence, where the walls rot, where pain becomes pleasure, where pleasure becomes death. This is the house of Din, he who dwells on the Black Star. Enter." I thought this was the coolest pitch for a bar I'd ever heard. I figured it was rehearsed, but she said that whole little phrase with a lot of conviction. I had no idea who Din was, and I certainly didn't know about black stars, but I did have a desire to push on. She walked me into the house, which was empty. No furniture, no nothing. Now, French Quarter real estate isn't cheap. So, if this place was renting a house just to serve as the cover for a bar, they clearly took themselves seriously. This might not be so boring after all. What happened next was strange. She turned me towards a small hallway with an elevator. Now, I know that some houses back in the day had elevators. However, this one only appeared to go down. New Orleans isn't exactly known for having basements, especially in homes. As I went to step in, she stopped me once more. "This is your second back-out chance. Same as before. You can turn around and leave. No harm, no foul." "Push the button," I replied, pointing at the down button, and stepped in. The elevator ride felt long. Really long. At first, I was thinking that this was impossible. No one builds down in the city. Hell, we even have to bury our dead above ground. As far as I could see, though, we were going down. This was one of those older elevators with just the metal grate door. I could see wood and metal going past us, and this eventually gave way to stone. I was about to question this when it occurred to me. "Cool trick," I said. "Trick?" Jody asked. Yeah, the elevator is rumbling in place while a rolling graphic goes by outside to look like we're going down, right? Because while I'm no expert in elevators, I would say that we had been going at least 20 stories below the city right now, and I know this just isn't possible. You're right, she replied, grinning. We aren't 20 stories below the city. We are by now at least 2,000 stories below, if you're using stories as a measurement. I wanted to say something back about how this was a lie, had to be a lie. We hadn't been riding that long, and that amount of depth wasn't possible on a tiny elevator like this. However, I figured this was all part of the act. Like her whole speech about the House of Din and all that crap. I didn't want to become too obnoxious or pushy. She might end up asking me to leave, figuring that I would ruin the scene for the other patrons. Instead, I just smiled and decided to play along with a really cool and elaborate bar scene, fake or not. This was by far the most ambitious effort I had ever seen put forward for a drinking establishment. Shortly after, the elevator stopped. Jody stepped in front of the doors, but before she opened them, she turned back to me. This is your final chance to back out, if you wish. I will take you back. However, once I open these doors, you will be in hell. You may find your way back to the surface tonight, but some find that leaving is just impossible. Some stay forever. In the interest of free will and fair play, I am bound by the Council of Nod to offer you this final chance to return to your life. Choose now. Amazing speech, Jody, I replied. Really great, and you guys clearly put some thought into this. Yes, I want to go to this bar. She smiled and opened the doors. A small door sat at the end of a wooden hallway that looked like it may have been built around the same time as the pyramids. There were no lights. I could only see by the small electric light in the elevator and the light coming from the door ahead. I walked forward, and as soon as I stepped off the elevator, the heat hit me. It wasn't so hot that I couldn't take it, but if anyone has ever experienced being in an attic on a really hot day with no ventilation, then you'll have an idea of how this felt. The air was thick beyond description. I instantly was covered in sweat, and I knew that if I stayed in this hallway for too long, I'd pass out. I tried to look back and saw the elevator already heading back up. From what I could see, there was no button to call it back down either. I guess Jody wasn't kidding when she said that this was my last chance to back out. I crossed my fingers that the bar would be air-conditioned and walked forward into the light. What happened over the next couple of hours is largely a blur. I'll tell it as best as I can. I entered the bar. It was small, very small, about the size of a bedroom. There was a single wooden bar, 3 bar stools pushed up to it, and 3 small tables in the corner area. The room was poorly lit. Only a small light bulb hanging from the cord was providing the light. However, it was well lit enough to see everything. And sitting right on the bulb seemed the most logical. There was a small shelf behind the bar. Typical setup. Liquor bottles in front of a mirror. There were 5 others in the room, plus the bartender. I saw a gothic girl sitting at the tables, sipping a drink with a rather plain-dressed man. There were 2 gentlemen at the other side. One was wearing a business suit, the other was wearing that awful cowboy attire that was popular in almost all walks of life, and even sacred bars. There was another woman, average in appearance, probably in her mid-30s, smoking at the other side of the bar. Of course, there was me too, so that completed our little circle. There was no music playing. The walls were old wood, oak maybe. The bartender, now, he was classic. White shirt, black pants, suspenders, and a bow tie, like something you'd see out of the Roaring '20s. It was still hot, too. Not as bad as the hallway, but pretty awful. Liquor would only make me hotter. But I was here now. I figured I'd test the waters. Now as for liquor, I saw no bottles that I could recognize. None were labeled. There was no beer either, no name brands, no cash register, no bar mat. This place was as simple as you could want. After a moment, the bartender spoke to me. "Welcome to hell," he announced, smiling. Cool name, sort of expected it though. I tried not to sound rude or pretentious. They had put on a great show tonight, but calling the place hell, really? Too predictable. Well, it translates differently in lots of places. Hell is just the way that you know it. Shall I call it something else? He asked, and he didn't seem to be joking or annoyed. No, hell is fine. How about a drink? Jack and Coke, please, I said. No Jack here, and no Coke either, he answered at once. What do you have then? Well, most people down here have a drink we call regret. I can also serve you loneliness. Or, if you're feeling particularly bold, our house specializes in damnation. Wow, you guys are really playing up the hell thing. Okay, serve me some regret, please. He handed me a drink poured from a brown bottle. It tasted amazing, too. I figured it had to be bourbon, and wished that I had some Coke to mix with it. Apparently, there was no ice here. I chuckled. Of course not. Ice in hell? What am I thinking? The drink was tasty, though, and the buzz hit me quick. I ordered up a loneliness and began to look around at my fellow patrons. None of them seemed to even notice me. The goth girl was pretty cute, though, so I picked up my drink and decided to walk over to her, when suddenly the woman sitting at the bar began to whimper. I'm so thirsty. Can I please have some water? She seemed to be pleading this to the bartender. No, ma'am, he replied with that same stupid grin. No water in hell. Not even a small amount. Have another cigarette, though. Wash it down with some hard liquor. No more smoking. My mouth is too dry. No more liquor. Water, please, she continued. And to me, it began to sound a lot like begging. Instead of handing her water, he held out an unlit cigarette. It was then that I noticed the overflowing ashtray, the size of a damn punch bowl sitting next to her. It was full of butts. Had to be over 1,000 of them in there. Had she smoked them all herself? I strained my eyes and studied her harder. Her lips were blistered badly. She had been at it for a while. The bartender patiently held out the cigarette, grin never leaving his face, until she finally sighed and took it. He produced a lighter and she took a drag. She began to cough violently, gagging too. I decided to chime in. Hey man, she doesn't look so hot, and I really don't think she needs another smoke. She looked like she's dying of thirst, too. And call the elevator, man. She's had enough, I think. The bartender turned his big smile on me. Who? Old Nancy here? Nah, Nancy is a trooper, man. Smokes a couple packs a day, and as far as her thirst, well, she knew this place was a thirsty sort of dive before she walked in the door. But she wanted to be here. She is getting exactly what she wanted. I walked over to Nancy and placed my hand on her shoulder. Ma'am, if you want to get out of here, I'll walk you over to the elevator. You don't look so great right now. I tried to sound as concerned as a 21-year-old kid could sound. Nancy looked at me and smiled. Oh, I'm fine. Just fine, she said. But her mouth quivered as she spoke. The bartender was watching us like a hawk, still smiling, but his smile no longer looked so friendly. Everything okay? He asked, beaming at us like a used car salesman. Nancy shakily replied yes. The bartender turned around, and in that second Nancy gripped my arm hard, pulled me into that smog that she was breathing, and whispered, Leave while you can. It was so low I almost missed it. Her breath was like a chimney. She must have been chain-smoking for days. I smoked, and so did most of my friends. And even on nights when we could chain smoke and pound booze until the sun rose, none of us were ever that toxic. I walked over to the man in the business suit. He, at least, appeared sane. "Hey, sir, I think that lady over there needs help," I said to him. The man looked at me and laughed. "We all need help, kid. We're in hell, after all." As he did this, I looked over at the goth girl just in time to see her begin to cut herself deep and hard from the looks of it. The plain-dressed man sitting next to her began to laugh in a high-pitched tone, almost a giggle. And that was when I noticed that he was masturbating. Only not in the sense that we all do at home, no. His dick was raw, bloody, torn away in places, but he just kept going at it. "Stop that! Look at what you're doing to yourselves!" I screamed at them. They looked at me, and I noticed that the girl was crying, but also smiling. Her eyes are practically begging to her self-inflicted pain to stop, yet she just kept cutting. I had seen enough. I reached over and attempted to pull the knife out of her hand, and just then I felt a strong grip on my shoulder, stronger than anything I'd ever felt in my life. It was the bartender. He had come around the bar to grab me. "No, no, sir," he screamed into my ears. "Every patron in hell gets to enjoy their treats without judgment. After all, judgment has already been passed. We exist beyond that now. Let her cut. She loves it, after all. Can't you see she loves it? She is smiling ear to ear." The bartender dragged me back to my stool, and with great speed, was somehow back behind the bar again. "Now, you wanted secrets, right, Kurt? You were bored and wanted more. This is what you came for. Now drink your drink before I beat your fucking face in." Through all of this, he never stopped smiling. He slammed a glass before me. A murky liquid was inside. He grabbed my arm and began to squeeze. The pain became unbearable. My mind began to race. This was no bar. This was something. But this was no bar. I wasn't ready to believe I was actually in hell, but I knew I was somewhere bad. "Drink your drink, sir!" he screamed again, and fearing that I would pass out from the pain, I slammed down the liquor in front of me. It tasted horrible. I couldn't describe it, and I can't now, but it was fierce. He let go of me, and suddenly the room got much hotter. The light began to flicker, and suddenly I was afflicted by knowledge. Things I didn't want to know. Things that no one would want to know. My mother had an affair. And the man I had grown up calling Dad was in fact not my father at all. I had a brother who died. I never knew that. My boss at work hated me. My grandfather committed suicide. All these years I thought he died naturally. My mother was going to abort me, but changed her mind because she couldn't afford the abortion. I was going to die alone. My wife, a woman that I would meet in 6 years and fall madly in love with, would die in a car crash with my 3-year-old son in the back seat. There was nothing I could do to change this. I would go blind in my 60s from a work-related accident. There were currently 34 people in the world right now, some who I thought as friends, who wanted me to die. They hated me. No one, not my mother, not my father, no one had ever loved me at all. Those were just a few of the secrets that suddenly hit me. There were thousands, maybe millions more, but by then, my mind couldn't process them all. They were some things about me, things about people I knew that were so dark that I'm thankful I couldn't remember them. Because to dwell on them for even a second longer would have brought on madness. Frantically, I looked around the bar. The woman Nancy was still smoking, only her throat was on fire, a small red glow smoldering right in the middle of her throat. She was clearly in the worst pain of her existence, but she continued to take puff after puff of her cigarette. Every time she did, the glow on her throat would get brighter. I looked straight ahead in the mirror before the bar, seeing the gore fest that had begun behind me. However, what took my attention was a small black figure standing directly to my right. It was maybe 5 feet tall. Its skin was jet black. The only thing that stood out was its eyes. They were human eyes, but bright. Not glowing, just bright enough to stand out from the onyx of its face. It had small horns on its head. It had very white, very sharp teeth. Somehow I knew this was Din. And I was in his house. I looked towards the door, but it was gone. The heat continued to get worse. The secrets were still popping into my mind, each worse than the ones before. Entire dimensions of my soul being revealed to me. All of it horrible. Just then my cell phone rang. The ringtone, something from my world, something from up above. It grabbed my attention, and in that moment, the secrets slowed down a bit. I looked down. It was 4 a.m. Mike was calling to check up on me. His name, Mike. Yes, I have a friend named Mike, my best friend. The more I focused on things that were real, the more stable things became around me. The secrets were almost stopping now. The macabre scene around me was slowing down too. Nancy was back to just smoking again. The goth girl wasn't cutting that sinister face of Din. It had also retreated just a bit. Mike, my oldest friend, yes, we grew up together. We had rode our bikes together, we had sleepovers, pizza parties, and the more I focused on the real world, if I could just... The door had come back. I bolted for it. Stop! You had your chance to back out, screamed the bartender, and I looked back just in time to see him leap over the bar at me. I shot through the doors and back into that tiny, impossibly hot hallway. The bartender burst through the doors, and I did the only thing that I could think of. If thinking about the real world weakened this place, then perhaps a real link to the real world would break it. I hit answer on my cell phone, and the voice of my best friend, who was calling from safety, greeted my ears. I could even hear music in the background. Real music. Mike, call the cops. I'm in real trouble here, I screamed into the phone. Why? I can barely hear you, man. Your connection sucks, he answered. The bartender was still coming, still grinning. I had one last idea. I pushed speaker. Mike's voice was a product of the living world, owned by someone who had not made a deal to enter some level of hell flooded by the hallway. The bartender stopped. He's not allowed to know of this place, to have any contact without being invited, even voice contact. It violates the Council of Nod. That was when the final blow to the bar from hell was delivered. I heard Mike in his sleepy yet concerned voice say, "What's the Council of Nod?" Contact had been made. Whatever rules governed this place had been broken. Suddenly, the elevator came down. The bartender, still smiling, looked down at me. "Sorry, sir, but you have violated the rules. You are no longer welcome at this bar. Please leave." Jody was standing in the elevator. I stood up and climbed in. The effect of the drink I consumed were gone. No more secrets. My phone had died. I guess calling from hell drains a battery, however. The effects were enough. We rode up in silence. When we reached the surface, Jody walked me out of the house, onto the stoop. Then she spoke. "You may think you've won tonight, but you didn't. You had a chance to ride this elevator up as well as down. Your heart wanted secrets instead of happiness, though, so it went down. You could have gone up, and everything that you could have ever possibly desired would have been yours. So go on. Feel proud. We like proud mortals, because the proud ones always find their way back to hell." "Fuck you, Jody," I replied, but did so as I walked away. I didn't want to tempt these people any more than I had. When I got home that night, I remembered all of the secrets. Over the years, they've slipped away slowly at first, and like a dream, I would wake up, and more would be lost. I wrote down the ones I listed here because I didn't want to forget them all. However, when I read them now, they don't seem like secrets anymore. It's like weird lies. Of course, I called the police the very next day. I wanted to help those people down there. I had to dress up the story a bit. I told the cops that I was led there by Jody after meeting her in the quarter. I left out the part about the place possibly being a level of hell, and simply described it as a basement where people were being tortured. The cops got a warrant and went in. The house was empty, as I said it was. However, there was no elevator found. The cops said there was a large closet area that appeared to have an old elevator at one time, but it was long gone now. The house was still on the market. It had no owner. For a few years, I would go down to Jackson Square around 2 a.m., hoping to catch Jody luring another victim into the house. However, I never saw her again. Years went on. I did marry, and no, my wife was never killed in a car accident. We don't have kids yet, though. Perhaps when I violated the contract, the Council of Nod, or whatever, I somehow broke that cycle. I never know, but I'll be careful. After I post this, I burn the list of secrets that I'd written down. Of course, I could always read them on here, but I won't. And in time, hopefully I'll forget them too. I never confronted my mother about the abortion plan, or asked who my real dad was. Those secrets seemed so real, but Satan is also called the father of lies for a reason. I'm not sure if Din is Satan, or just a lesser version of him. But I doubt that Din is very honest, either. So, I post this as a warning. A warning to be careful when seeking out secrets. Some things are kept secret for a reason. And to know them is to know madness.